All right, we are back with How Should I Introduce You? I've got two great friends of mine joining me today on this call, Shae Harris and Jessica Gray. Again, two great people that, as I was looking through my phone, I was saying to myself, who could I connect? When should I connect them? And, I tried to envision what the conversations would be like. And so when I saw both of your names in my phone, I was like, this is it. I think this would be a good way to leverage two contacts that I have, two friends that I have. And I'm just, curious and interested to see how the conversation would go. And I envisioned it going well, and I know it's going to go well. So I thank you guys for participating in this exercise, so to speak, an experiment. For those that are watching, my goal is to reimagine and reshape what networking looks like, just specifically in this COVID-19 period. There's not a lot of opportunity for in-person networking and in-person relationship building. So I just started looking through my phone and saying to myself, it'd be good if this person knew this person. It'd be good if that person knew this person. And here we are. So we're like in our fourth or fifth recording. And I'm happy to have you guys here.
Happy to be here.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
So what I did prior to us recording, I reached out to the both of you all and asked you all to give me some bullet points or, a short bio of each of you. And I want to be able to just read that for the sake of the folks that are watching this. And Shae, I'll start with you. You are currently serving as a policy advisor within DC government, and a part of your role is working on issues related to the criminal justice sector. You believe systemic change happens at the policy level and by activating directly impacted communities. You also truly believe that change that we're seeking is already embedded with us. So Shae, I thank you for joining us on this one.
Thank you.
Now, you're welcome. You're welcome. Now I want to just briefly read what Jessica sent over to me. She's a mother of two, values self-awareness, work ethic, and integrity. Changes careers 3 times, and still doesn't know what she wants to be when she grows up. Has an unhealthy relationship with perfection, and audio books are her jam. So, Jess, thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to meet you, Shae.
Likewise. When I saw your intro, I was like, dang, I got to go back to the drawing board.
So it's funny Shae mentioned that because Shae shot me a text like, man, I got to do mine over. And one of the things that Shae wanted to add was that she's a self-care guru and she's an avid napper. So that's her additions to her bio. And I want to kind of start there with respect to self-care. Shae, how do you define that? Like what does that look like for you in terms of self-care?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I won't say, I'm still evolving, but I'm committed to doing self-care. And to me, it takes various facets, but it's really living and walking authentically, I think, in your truth and doing and listening to what your body needs and what you need in order to be okay. Silas, we do work where if often people put themselves last, and I've seen the toll that takes on people. I've seen it within my own family and community, and I'm just committed to doing what is necessary to take care of myself. And so sometimes that's going to get a massage. In COVID, not so much. It used to be, going, getting on a flight every now and then and just getting away to just be still. I love being around water, so that's automatic self-care for me. But that also means like therapy, which has been a really interesting journey that I've been on. Self-care isn't always cute with like manis and petties. Sometimes it's really digging in and holding yourself accountable and doing the work. But it's so important and it's so necessary in our community, and especially now with all that we're living through.
Jess, you mentioned self-awareness. How does that show up in your life?
So this is something that I've just really started being really more in tune with. I would do these things to myself where if I'm feeling really anxious or I'm feeling really upset about something or I'm feeling whatever the emotion is, I had this talk with myself to ask, where's this coming from? Why do you feel this way? Is it based in reality or is it based in something else? Fear, anxiety? Are you being oversensitive? Are you being insensitive? You know, having these talks with myself to really understand where, why I'm feeling triggered about something. And it wasn't until a while after I'd been doing that's part of what self-awareness really means. It's like this sense of awareness about yourself. I just defined it, but or reworded it, but it's a sense of awareness that I think is really important to have, because sometimes you get so rooted in what you think is the truth and what you think is right and what you think is wrong, or when you feel wrong. And sometimes it's not right. Sometimes it's not based in reality. You know, you're snapping on your kids, or you're snapping on your spouse, or you're angry about, you know, something that's so small, and you're trying to, rather than feeling justified in that anger, asking yourself, is this warranted, and why are you really feeling like this? You know, it was just, you know, my son could spill some cereal and it's easy to clean up. You just sweep it up, put it in the trash. And if I'm feeling like, oh my God, why did you do, I'm asking myself, wait, what is really bothering me about the spilled cereal? Is it the cereal really? It's usually not. It's something about maybe that happened earlier in the day or the day before, or I'm tired, or I haven't eaten anything, or I haven't had coffee yet. And then trying to slow down and figure out where that emotion is coming from, and try to check myself, you know. And I've come to learn that that's something I also really value in people, because I think that a person with a sense of self-awareness apologizes easily, or not easily, but at least recognizes when they're wrong, recognizes when they've overreacted to something, or, you know, they've have some misplaced anger or frustration about something. And I'm noticing that when people can come to you and say how they're really feeling, that I value that. I've come to value that more than anything, because we live in such a sometimes superficial world, and very and people are just closeted and closed in, and so I recognize how uncomfortable it can make somebody feel to be able to do that, but also recognize how healthy it is to do that, and how genuine the relationships evolve when people can do that. So that's how self-awareness, I think, shows up in my life. And it's something that subconsciously I look for in the people around me.
I, the one, there are a couple of commonalities between the two of you that I see when I interact with the both of you. And one thing that I see that stands out is that both of you are doers. You all don't display a lot of emotion. And I've been in situations with each of you where other people would have displayed more emotion, but you all have a way of guarding it to some degree, and not in an unhealthy way, but in a very healthy way. And I've noticed that you all both have a skill where you're able to utilize the ability to protect yourselves emotionally in professional settings and also personal settings. Do you often, or do you ever see yourself in a space where, in an effort to protect yourself from being too emotional, that it actually hurts, or that it actually hampers your ability to be true to yourself?
Well, like, I'm gonna call my therapist, Silas.
Right, right.
Ooh, brother, you're a great observer, man. That's a really loaded question. The short answer is yes. While I think being guarded and being able to at least always appear that you're in control, right? Because really you're not. But being able to have that facade and like, that's something that I think inherited and watched and was socialized around my mother, and she's always like stoic and never bothered, right? And so it has been helpful in my career, but I also feel like in order to make it to my next level, it's going to require a level of vulnerability that I'm still learning. Because in order for people to truly connect to you, they have to feel you. And while, you know, policy is something I'm doing now and I think will always be a part of my work, I also understand that, you know, policy is words, but if you're really trying to make a true change and impact, you have to sometimes change people's hearts and their minds. And that takes a level of vulnerability and authenticity that can get lost when you're constantly thinking about and controlling or attempting to control your emotion. And so it's definitely something that I continue to struggle with. And like I said, it's not all bad. It certainly, I think, has its place, especially being a Black woman. I've often been the youngest person in the room, sometimes the only person of color or Black person in the room. And so, and sometimes the only woman, and in all those different scenarios, right? Sometimes all three. So in those scenarios, like, you have to be mindful of so much. But I'm trying to work on the balance that allows me to still be who I am, because some of that is just who I am, but also being comfortable enough and understanding that some moments call for you to show the emotion and the energy. And sometimes that's the only way, or not the only way, but part of the strategy, I think, in order to move people. So it's a continuous effort, and not always a great thing, but yeah, I'm working on it. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, if I could have said this, I would have said the exact same thing. Like, literally the exact same thing. I am, you know, the youngest person in the room almost all the time at work. Also the only woman in the room, only Black woman. And I don't know at what point we've internalized this idea that, you know, we have to be stoic, we have to be reserved, we can't be too, witty, but not too witty, not too sassy, not too emotional. And we've come to really internalize this thing about what society tells you about what Black women are. And then we try to just be the opposite as much as possible in certain spaces. And I think that's where that reservation comes from, or that lack of emotion sometimes. And it's absolutely been harmful in, I would say, more in my personal life than my professional life, for sure, where sometimes that desire to be in control and always think logically and always think, and try to be as put together as possible, that's where you're not being your authentic self, your authentic response to something, because you've already calculated in your mind, if my authentic response or my genuine response is emotional and it's going to be a lot for me to handle and maybe too much for the other person to handle. So let me respond in this more controlled, logical, I'm not that upset, or I'm happy, but I don't want to be, too happy, or whatever it is. Sometimes I think that, it has been harmful because it's not genuine, and I think that it's something that we've observed in our parents and the women that around us, that we've grown up seeing, and we're emulating them in a way, consciously or subconsciously, that we just always have to be strong and put together, in a way that just is really unrealistic, quite honestly. So I do think it is harmful in our personal relationships, and it's harmful to us, because at what point do we sort of grow out of it and say, I just want to be able to react naturally. I want to be able to have this emotional relationship that is healthy. without it being perceived as a negative or too emotional or whatever we think the response will be.
While the both of you were talking about that particular topic, one thing that came to mind was the fact that we're now in this state where for Black people, justice is so important. And the both of you in your own careers have worked in the justice space, and being sometimes the only Black person, the only young person, the only woman in the room, I wonder if using more emotion could be used as a strategy to get them to be as compassionate about the people where the people who need the justice the most, right? I mean, obviously, if we're considering whether it be a juvenile or an adult, and there's a situation where you've got to provide advice around how to respond to that. That person's profile better than anyone else in that room at that moment, and maybe there is an opportunity to use emotion from a strategic perspective to say, this is why this is important right now. We've got to act this way right now. And maybe there's an alternative to what we currently do or what we've done to this point. So that's the thought that kind of came to my mind. It's like maybe utilizing the emotion as a strategy and like doing it with intention in certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Tamika Mallory, when she gave the speech that she gave right after George Floyd's murder, I mean, I think that's a really strong example of intentional emotion, because I think it really struck a nerve with the audience, and it felt genuine. It felt, completely an authentic response to Black anger and rage in a way that I think resonated with listeners, but especially I think Black women, almost giving us permission to feel that and to do that. Because I think, again, anytime you're put on the spot, or you're in a media light, or you're in whatever light, and you have a platform, we could use Instagram, for example. We almost feel forced to make sure that the lighting is right, and that the picture is filtered correctly, and you're using the right verb tense, and it's easy to get caught up in trying to have a certain look and response that looks authentic, but also like perfect. And that's why I said in my bio, this unhealthy relationship with perfection, because I think it's just so pervasive. Not just I think it's becoming more and more obvious in the social media presence, but certainly this idea that being perfect is what we should be striving for. And I think that also takes the emotion out of things, because we've decided that if it's not perfect, it's not correct, or it's not right, as opposed to thinking about, am I giving it my best? Am I giving it my all? Is it authentic? Is it true to who I am? We'd rather say, well, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to do it. And it's just unrealistic, and I've seen this word so many times in the last few months, but I'm gonna say it. It's toxic, it's toxic for us, and it was toxic. For me, it's toxic for me because, again, it almost feels like when you are, and this is why also I didn't put it like, I have this very uncomfortable thing about talking or speaking highly about myself. Like when I was trying to write the bio, everything self-deprecating kept coming to mind. Like, I don't want to lead with accomplishments. I don't want to lead with like things I've done, because in my mind it's like, did I really do that, or did I really do that well? Did I really perfect it? So then I'm not going to bring it up. And it's something that I'm like consciously working on, because again, it feels like it's not authentic, not being true to myself. Because yes, I have done those things and I've worked really hard for them, and I should be proud of myself for that. But I've also convinced myself that in some aspects, if it wasn't done, if it wasn't executed perfectly, then, you know, was it a success? And going back to Tamika, though, you know, I think that she just really spoke truth to power in that moment, and it felt real and emotional, and I really appreciated that. Yeah. Okay. I knew it was gonna happen.
One thing I thought about while you were saying that was, you know, the things that we do, are they useful? Right. So being perfect is one thing, but are they useful? I watch a lot of Grant Cardone videos, and he is in the sales space. And one of the things that he said was he wrote a bestseller book, and it had a bunch of misspelled words, and people complained about the words being misspelled. And he said it's a bestseller. And even more importantly, when I wrote the next book, that book was a bestseller. Right. So people saw the misspelled words, they bought that book, they read the book, they got beyond the misspelled words, and then he wrote another book, and they came back and bought that one too. So I think, yeah, I would definitely prefer usefulness over perfection. I think I go through that too myself. If I leaned on perfection, I would have never started recording these videos, because I don't have the right backdrop, I don't have the right lighting, right? But I feel like I have the right people having these sorts of discussions that can be beneficial for other people. So, you know, to me, I'm leaning now more toward being useful than trying to be perfect.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's something, yeah, I felt like I was literally listening to myself as Jessica was speaking. So, Silas, you were spot on in like connecting us. There's so many similarities, but perfection is something that, you know, is unattainable. And so to your point, I was like, why risk your passion, your purpose, something you're called to do because you're trying to be perfect? And what's really helped me with that, it's probably going to sound funny, but I'm so serious, is being in rooms where I've realized people that I, for whatever reason, because of race, because of, you know, being indoctrinated with white supremacy throughout the course of our lives, have walked into rooms where the assumption would be, oh, these people are cream of the crop, like they are heads of things and have all these titles and letters behind their name. And I'm in the room like, they're not even intelligent. Like they're, and so like, I think it's really helped me to see like how mediocre some people are, to be like, no, not only do I deserve to be in this room, I deserve to be leading this room, because I know what I'm talking about, either through lived experience, being proxy to someone's lived experience, you know, the time I spent in school, et cetera. And so that is still a struggle and a process, but that has really helped, especially, again, with some of the conversations that we're having right now around, do Black lives really matter, et cetera. This is certainly the time to speak up, and it's not going to always be perfection, but your voice is necessary. So I'm trying to lean into that.
Random question for the both of you. Who were you in the 4th grade? Describe yourself.
What age is 4th grade?
9.
9 or 10.
Ooh.
I'm laughing because my son is going to the 4th grade, and I immediately start thinking about, who is he? And am I like him, or is he like me? And the answer is absolutely not. And I don't know how much of that is gender or how much of that is, I don't know. But I have so many vivid 4th grade memories for a couple of reasons. One, I went to Wheatley Elementary School in Trinidad, Northeast DC. I was in Miss Scott Green's class, and Miss Scott Green, she really liked me. I think this is where you know, the whole idea of perfectionism really started for me was in elementary school, ironically, because grades were always so important. And I like making all A's was like a really big deal. And like getting good grades was, I mean, the pinnacle of anything you could do. Not necessarily like critical thinking or or trying something really hard and like maybe doing just okay with it, but it was really hard. So you know, you still did the effort. It was the grades. So Miss Scott Green's class, I at that age really thought I wanted to be an artist. And I wrote an essay for Black History Month on Henry Ossawa Tanner, who was a African American painter, and he has a really famous painting called The Banjo. And I remember writing in this essay contest, and I won a $50 savings bond. And I just remember feeling like extremely proud of myself about that. And again, I was like, I made really good grades in school. Miss Scott Green really liked me. You know, always the student that would run the errands for the teachers. I mean, this is when back in the day when you still had to send students to the front desk to do attendance, you know. So you had to get your attendance slips. The teachers always needed stuff. Go to this teacher's room to get that stuff. So at 9 years old, I was a people pleaser. You know, I wanted to be liked as a kid. I wanted to be, I wanted adults to like me, not as much the kids, but the adults, because at that age, that's what I saw the value in the teachers really liking you and then picking you to do special things. That's who I was. And my son is the complete opposite in a way that is almost like I admire, because he does not care what anybody thinks. He doesn't try to be the teacher's pet. He doesn't try to butter up to adults. He speaks his mind, and with no fear of consequence, not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that he's just being honest and true to himself. And I'm grateful that I feel like I'm raising a man or a boy to become a man, to be comfortable in who he is at 9. Because I know at 9, I really, as I'm thinking more about it, you know, it was really about wanting to be liked. And if he's liked, he's okay with it. And if he's not, he's okay with that too.
I'm like, just canoe, the teacher, like my memory is horrible. So I'm gonna attempt to recount it's gonna be a lot more general. But at 9, so I come from a single parent background. My mother was an educator. And so I vividly remember being in summer school like every year. And my friends like will make fun of me because they're like, you didn't flunk, like why are you in summer school? And it was, you know, my mom was like, no, learning is year round. And so you're gonna take this like sign language or Spanish or something, some kind of enrichment. Like that was a constant memory from my childhood. And I used to be so upset about it. I appreciate it now, but I used to be so blown. So I remember that. I was in private school, so I remember hating uniforms and like doing stuff, not maliciously, but wanting to test authority and wanting to be maybe not a rebel, but certainly didn't want to conform. I've always been like that. And I've always asked questions. If I don't understand something or I don't think it's the right answer, constantly asking in school and sometimes getting in trouble for it. Because if it didn't make sense to me, I struggled to have to do it. And being one of the few Black kids in my elementary school, I recall that as well. I'm from Ohio, so Midwest is a different kind of racism. And well, I'm sure every region says that, right? But I have some vivid memories of attempts and times that white people tried to make me feel inferior. And even with some of my teachers, like I don't recall having a Black teacher until maybe middle school, and that was like our music teacher. But I again had a mother that was a teacher, and so Black History was not just in February, it was all the time. And I'm also grateful for that because it allowed me to walk in purpose and understand that I was royalty even as a child, when a lot of other people and everything in my textbook was trying to tell me differently. So those are, you know, a few of the memories that I have from being that young. But yeah, that's wow. I've not thought about elementary school in a long time.
And I asked that question because a friend of mine who is in leadership in the faith-based area, his church, they hired a consultant to help them with organization. And he was sharing with me that the consultant came in and asked the leadership within the church that question. And he said that the question was asked because who you are as an adult is typically an extension of who you were in the fourth grade. So to hear both of you describe the fourth grade and to hear the both of you describe what that memory was, I hear a lot of who you are today, both of you, in that story. For me, as a 9-year-old in the fourth grade, I remember winning the spelling bee in my school, and I beat a 6th grader in the spelling bee. And I remember being the only time I would get in trouble was talking in class, right? I would finish my work fast and then I would talk and get other people distracted, and they would call my house and my mother would have to come up there periodically. So I guess for me now in my adult life, there are certain things that that stick out that are comparable to fourth grade. I'm still a stickler for like spelled words. I am still very talkative in the sense that, you know, I like connecting with people. So, and I think more importantly, people talk to me, right? And I end up listening a lot to people. So there are times where I'll leave out the house and Valerie will think I'm coming back in an hour, and I end up coming back home in 2 hours because somebody stopped me for like 45 minutes, and most of the conversation was me listening to them just ramble and ramble and ramble. And now in this phase of my life, I'm trying to control that more. One, because you can't take on other people's problems as much as you used to. But then also, I'm more aware of time now than I've ever been, and the impact of time. Where am I going to use my time? How am I going to use it? Before I cut on this hour-long YouTube, am I going to waste my hour, right? Am I going to waste my 2 hours watching Netflix? So I'm in this phase now where I'm really thinking a lot about what time means and how useful time can be for me. But then more importantly, you know, can I use this time to be able to help someone who is in need of help, but also someone who can take the help and run with it, right? So the three of us are all in this space where, you know, our work impacts other people directly. And in terms of legacy, Shae, like, what do you think about like this next phase of life beyond COVID-19, going back to the real world, going back to the office, having this space to work from home, but now getting back into more of a huddled group and trying to get more work done? What do you think that next phase looks like?
Yeah, that's forecasting that I've been trying to avoid in a lot of ways. Because now that I've gotten semi-adjusted to working from home, I'm like, what does it look like to have to be back in the office and be around people? Like, I'm an only child, so I'm okay with being like by myself. I do not struggle with that at all. But do miss, you know, connectivity and being able to have synergy with people. So I think coming back, like the stakes are so high right now that I'm just trying to be thoughtful about projects that can really have either immediate impact or a huge impact, because so many people, like the economic fallout of this is something that I don't even think we begin to scratch the surface and being able to understand. And you compound that with how COVID and all of the other societal ills that are impacting the Black communities. Like, what does that really mean for Black people coming out of this? I spend a lot of time trying to think about what more I can be doing to try to help Black people, especially, and people that are in need. And, you know, I think for me, while my work is centered in criminal justice system and the policy around that, really focusing on economics and how all of it intersects, because there are going to be so many people, unfortunately, that are without employment and without skill sets, candidly, that are going to lend to, I think, what the world looks like after COVID. A lot of the, you know, hospitality, things of that nature, it's not going to go away, but certainly in the District of Columbia, I think for the foreseeable future is going to look a whole lot different. And so how do we do the pivot to help and ensure that people aren't left behind? That's something that really keeps me up at night, because we're still dealing with an unknown. But I know that, like, whether it's coding, whether it's, you know, really organizing people to be thoughtful about how we're spending money and our tax dollars, et cetera, right, all of those things are going to be critically important. But that's a hard question, because it's like, we don't know. We really don't know. But really just trying to be thoughtful about where I use my energy and trying to be strategic about organizing people. I think organizing people is going to be very important, and it's going to look different, to your point, Silas, because, you know, big rallies, et cetera, and even conferences, stuff that we normally go to, I think that's going to be different for a while. So just trying to be thoughtful about all those things. But for me, a lot of my work, I think, is going to pivot to some form of economic justice and what that means for all of the varying sectors that I have the ability to touch.
Yeah, I recently finished a book called The 5-Day Weekend, and it is not, the title would suggest that it is one of those books where you're trying to get rich quick and just live your life on the beach. But when I finished the book, what really was vivid for me upon finishing it was that it was more about how do you create space in your life to be financially free, to be able to have more of an impact. And so it gave tips about investments. It gave tips about businesses that can reward you with revenue, but it also kept reminding you throughout the book that this is not about going out and buying a Ferrari or a Rolex. It's about really being able to free yourself up. And it was really a point of conviction for me, because I think so many of us that do work that is outward facing on behalf of other Black people, we give our all, and we're not always focused on revenue to be able to free ourselves up to do things, not just things that we want to do, but the way in which we want to do them. And sometimes the work that we do is entangled, for lack of a better phrase, and it's entangled in a larger bureaucratic system where we can't always take on the specifics that interest us the most. So for you, I guess, Jess, what would a 5-day weekend look like if you could really be financially free and, you know, focus in on your impact?
I just wanted to go back a little bit and talk about, before that, can I respond to like the legacy? I had my earpiece in, so I was still listening. Mm-hmm. I wanted to respond to, you know, COVID legacy. And if anything I've seen on both a micro and macro level is lack of leadership, in a way that I don't think people have really, I think that is going to force people to learn more about what kind of leaders they want to be and what does leadership really look like. I can give a few, just an example, like on a small scale, thinking about like my own agency and where I work and how, and really just how, yes. I have to find it. Can you give me 1 second, please? I'll come and get it in 1 second. But you know, this idea that people should be able to work at the same level and productivity as they would have pre-COVID, is something that, in my opinion, demonstrates a lack of leadership because, you know, we're all shifting and pivoting. And I can remember when DC government was staunchly against telework. You know, I don't know how long, Shae, you've been in DC government, but we're so far behind the federal government in terms of telework in and of itself. You know, my sister has been teleworking, I mean, 5, 6, 7 years. You know, the federal government has a much more relaxed, I shouldn't say relaxed, but depending on what agency you're at, you could be teleworking 5 days a week 5 years ago, you know, where right now the district is just coming into this 2 days a week telework. And now having been forced into this, you know, 5 days a week telework, so many managers and agency leaders are still uncomfortable with the idea. I mean, I know agencies that didn't have any telework policy at all. And so I'm thinking about, you know, what does leadership really look like right now? And have you really led in a way that people are behind you and support your, I don't want to say vision, because I think vision is too broad, but really, have you led in a way that people feel empathy, people feel you have their support, and they feel like you are supporting them as employees, and really just recognizing that we're all in a very unique place. You've never had to leave during a pandemic. I've never had to work during a pandemic, or I've never had to, you know, be held to this standard under such different work environment. You know, a lot of people are home with their children, and it's very different. And when I hear leaders holding people to standards and expectations of pre-pandemic, you know, it really is disheartening, because for me, it just looks like you just have no empathy for the work that people do and how difficult a time this is for people. And I think that's what leadership really looks like. It looks like adjusting and understanding, and really coming from a place of, I know we still have to get this work done because we know the work needs to get done. We know certain things have to be done. And especially if you're at a social services agency, you know, and you work for a government agency, we take on the responsibility of the people. You know, we represent, not just represent, but we provide support and services to district residents. And so in a lot of ways, there is a lot of pressure on us, but I still think that the leadership has to come to a point and say, these, you know, 4 things are really important. These other 10 things, these other 5 things, whatever they are, they're not as important. We can table those so you can focus on this, and you can also focus on like your family, and you can focus on making sure that you're okay and your family is okay and your children are okay. And so I think the legacy of COVID, my hope for the legacy of COVID is that people will look at leadership differently, and not about performance metrics, and not about, it's because it's not just that. Ooh. What happened?
I think Silas might have dropped off.
Oh, I can't see you though.
Oh.
I don't know why, but I'll just keep talking because it's still recording. But I hope that, you know, that's really my hope for the COVID legacy. And then also, for myself, I think a lot about how I can help not just the Black community, but also Black mothers in particular. It's just really, it's been really devastating, I think, for parents especially, but Black mothers especially, because if you're already in a situation where you have a high stakes job, or your job is not allowing you to telework, or you have multiple kids at home on multiple different grade levels, and you're just trying to manage your household and work full time. You're already dealing with probably like a superwoman complex, where you have to do 1,000 things at one time in order to feel like you are a successful parent. And because we put all this pressure on ourselves to really be great moms and great spouses and great cooks, and all this extra stuff that we're trying to do on top of surviving the pandemic, I really just think about, what can I do? What can I create? What could I help with? What could I help develop that would help Black mothers during this time? And I think about that often. I haven't really come up with anything, but I think as I think a lot about my own situation, and I'm blessed to be able to have a job that'll let me telework 5 days a week until stage 4, as far as I know. I think about mothers who don't have that. But even if you do have that, how hard it is. I mean, how truly difficult it is to try to work and manage your household and get your kids on virtual learning on time, and all the assignments that come with that. And it's a lot. It's really a lot to try to deal with at one time. So that's something that I really want to be able to figure out how I can help in that way, and it really be meaningful.
That's beautiful, Jessica. And yeah, I mean, like, there's certainly a level of privilege.
Oh, there you are. I can see you now.
See me? There's
Yeah.
certainly a level of privilege that I know I have, right? And as you said, even just being able to work from home during this time, and to even still be employed, is a huge, huge blessing that I don't take for granted. And you're so right. Like, I'm barely keeping it together, and it's literally just me in here, right? So I can't even begin to imagine like trying to be a primary or even any type of caretaker for a child during this time, and still trying to juggle work and just keeping your sanity with all, when you turn on the TV, it's a lot. And so
Yeah.
Especially for Black mothers, just with everything, it's like Black people are always disproportionately impacted. And I think that's so true. Like, how are we going to provide relief? Because we're a few weeks away from when school's supposed to start, and so yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. That's such an important part.
Yeah. Silas, I don't remember your question, because I answered I went back to the legacy question, the COVID legacy question, but you'd asked me a different question. I can't remember it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I got knocked off for a second, and that's the second time that's happened with the recordings. But that's a part of this new age, or this new phase, I should say, of COVID-19. As a result, I think I may have forgotten the question that I was asked, but I do remember.
I think it was the 5 day.
Oh, my 5.
Yes,
my
yes,
5-day weekend.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm always thinking about, because what I'm always thinking about is, how can I work less but sustain my livelihood? Even if I have to scale back on certain things, how can I still have a comfortable livelihood but work less? And I already know I would absolutely spend more time with my kids, more intentional time with my kids. And so even though, like, we're all obviously home all day long already, and we're spending an enormous amount of time together, I'm spending at least 9 or 10 hours of that working. And I may be in and out of helping them with something or trying to do something with them, but it's really hard to do that and work right now. And then on the weekends, we're all just so burnt out. I'm trying to like do something fun. At the same time, I'm trying to rest. A 5-day weekend would really look like being intentional about how we spend our time and really, I don't want to say like curating, but really thinking about how can I teach them something? How can I give them values? How can I, show them and model for them family structure, and just really being intentional about them being the best people they are and giving them the tools to do that. Because that's where I feel like, even though we're spending all this time together now, it's not intentional in that way, if that makes sense. We're not like, my son was learning fractions towards the end of the school year, and he was really struggling with it because fractions are one of those things where, I think you need to have a visual aid. You need to have like a model, not just on paper, 1/2, 1/2. So what I kept saying to myself was, we're gonna cook a pizza, and then we're gonna show measurements through that, or we're gonna make biscuits, and we're gonna use the measuring cup, and and we did it, but we just didn't have the time to do it the way I really planned to do it, because I had like finished working at 6 or like 5:30, and then they need to be fed, they need to be bathed, and then I try to give them some time to decompress. So whereas I really wanted to delve into it and spend this like hour time to really devote to reinforcing the idea of fractions, it really ended up being like 20 minutes, because we just need to get this even rolling, because you need to, it's other stuff I'm trying to get to. And that's just like one example, but just imagine just so many times where I just want to have these teachable moments with them that I can't, and I'm always feeling pressed for time because there's just always something to do, always. So how I would spend my 5-day weekend, being intentional about my family time.
And the one thing that I noticed during this period, there was a meme that came out early on in the pandemic that said, if you don't come out of this with a new business,
Right.
if you come out of this with something, extravagant, then it's not the pandemic, it's you. And then I saw people justifiably so fight back against that, saying like, listen, to survive this is an accomplishment. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Jess. I feel guilty a lot about, I could be producing more in this period. But then there are times where, especially with me having, a relatively newborn child, to me, time, love, and affection will probably take them further than a fraction. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've had to kind of think about that, because I had a goal of this year, she's going to know all the alphabets and she's going to be saying this many words. But I think a hug, or holding her in my arms is more important than her having 12 words down pat. And I've been in a real state of reflection around how I was raised, and also friends of mine, how they were raised, and people that I admire, how they were raised. And when I say raised, I'm not just talking about childhood. I mean, even into adulthood, how we develop. And that may be a better way to say it. And the people who are more in tune with themselves, the people who love themselves, the people who, like we talked about at the beginning, utilizing self-care, those are the people that are truly the most successful. And that's the way you can have impact. Assad can know all the fractions in the world, but like, if he doesn't feel loved by his mom and dad, then that's not the experience that he'll end up cherishing the most, right? The lessons come and go, but I think being a well-rounded person, being emotionally balanced, being in control as much as you can be of yourself in these situations, that to me has been far more important especially trying to be an example for someone. And that's the strangest thing about this period for me, is like to have somebody like a child watching you all day and seeing how you respond, seeing your emotions. So that goes even into what you talked about, Jess, with leadership. How are the leaders in our work lives responding to this? How self-aware are they? Are they getting the time for self-care? All these things matter. And I know for me, where I work, we've had conference calls where, fortunately, the leadership has allowed us to be able to express ourselves on these calls outside of work. So I think that is more valuable than a salary. It's more valuable than a title. It's more valuable than a noteworthy organization. It's just those one-to-one interactions and then those small group interactions where it feels like someone really cares about you and that you feel seen in those moments.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think there's just so much value in leaders the same way, and our kids seeing us as humans, and really seeing us as not superheroes with superpowers, because I think that's what people think leadership is. But it's like really allowing people to see you as a person, with who's also dealing with things, and how you deal with them is really, I think, what makes you a strong leader. And in the same respect, a good parent, how you respond to behavior, how you respond to frustration, how you respond to sadness, anger, healthy responses, and is what your children really need, and what I think is important to model for them. And the same is with adults and in leadership positions, I think it's important.
Yeah, I've also been curious during this period about the thing that I am curious about is that while I believe that there's some pushback necessary with that meme about people coming out of the pandemic, being like superheroes, I do think there are some people that will come out of this with some great inventions, great ideas, great books, that sort of thing. So a part of what motivates me every day is thinking that there's somebody else actually putting the work in across town or across the country or across the globe. And like, that also keeps me balanced, where I'm not selling myself short either. So I guess my question for the both of you, putting aside COVID-19, obviously we want to be realistic about what we can and cannot do. But is there a balance that can be struck with respect to healthy competition in the workplace, healthy competition in your profession, being able to occasionally look to the next lane and see somebody going hard and that being an inspiration? Like, do you think you can strike a balance with that?
Absolutely. I think it's necessary. This time, has certainly made me reflect even more on all my relationships and what value add they are, and also the value add that I want to be to other people, in my life. And one of the things that's been so striking to me is being around people that challenge me, and being in community with people that challenge me, and not just to do more and, all of those like motivational pieces, but also that challenge me to be accountable to myself. And if I say I'm going to do something, okay, girl, we talked about that 3 months ago. Like, where are you on this project that you said you wanted to work on, or with these weight loss goals, et cetera? So it's also, just, I think, being in proximity and community with people that hold you accountable and keep you accountable, and that motivates you. I am blessed to have amazing friends and family that, constantly motivate me. And even my friends group, especially my friends, like, that has been a huge blessing and it's healthy, right? And it's not that I am jealous of you, but if I see you getting it, like that motivates me to want to do it. Like, okay, you know what, let me turn off this Netflix and go ahead and do this schedule that I said I was going to do, or read this book, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's been really helpful for me to have healthy competition in a way, and just to be in community with people that continue to push me. But also, and you know, I have to remind myself of this, but also the people that I love, because most of us had that streak of wanting to be a perfectionist, etc. Is to show yourself as much grace as you show other people, right? Some days, like, the whole list is not going to get done, and that's okay. And like, holding space for that as well. But absolutely, there are some things that I've written down that like need to happen before the end of 2020, regardless of, you know, COVID. And like, I need to motivate myself and hold myself accountable. For me, even if all of those things don't get checked off the list, I really want to be intentional about working on my discipline. Like, that's an area of growth for me that I really want to get better at. Like, in my head, I have this whole morning routine, right, that I want to do, that includes like meditation or yoga or prayer, right, and reading scripture, etc. And some days I'm like, I don't even set an alarm. Like, I'm gonna just get up. And like, I really want to get better. I don't know if I'll ever be a morning person. I've accepted that. But even if I'm not, right, like, getting up in enough time to be able to set up my day for success is something that's really important to me, and that I still struggle with, but like, I'm committed to getting it down in 2020. So I'm like, if not now, when, right? Like, there's a tremendous amount of flexibility that I have right now that I need, you know, I'm privileged and blessed to have. Still have a lot of work to do, but I'm like, if I can have 15 minutes for myself every morning that I'm disciplined enough to commit to doing, to me, that will be like a huge victory. So yeah, I think healthy competition is needed right now, but also being honest and giving ourselves grace too.
Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I also thought about with respect to healthy competition is pulling other people along. Maybe I shouldn't say pulling, but trying to assist other people in this process of getting beyond this point. Sometimes when it comes to networking, or when it comes to personal development, we only think about ourselves. But then there are also people who are worthy of us investing into as well, whether it be peers, whether it be people that could potentially be mentees. And then also sometimes people that mentor us may need help in terms of staying connected to what's happening currently. One thing I thought about during this period is I spend a lot of time with peers and a lot of time with people who could potentially be mentees. But one thing I've grown to be aware of is that I'm really seeking more mentorship for myself in an effort to be better for people coming along behind me. And I don't like to get caught up in gender, but I think there are some times where gender plays a role in how we view things. It seems to me, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me in society that men across generations can connect a lot faster. So I wanted to hear from both of you all about connecting with women who may be older that could potentially serve as mentors. Like, is that something that is at your disposal regularly, or are there still challenges with respect to connecting with women that could potentially mentor you?
That's a great question, and also like a loaded question. And if I'm being honest, I had to do some work on myself to unlearn some things in terms of being in the right mind frame and mindset to accept like leadership from women, Black women specifically, because I was a tomboy growing up, and you know, definitely fell into the myth of like, a lot of girls do too much, I don't have time for the negativity, et cetera, right? And really, I think in my early 20s, for me, that started to shift. And I've always had like girlfriends, but it's been a real like small, close knit group. And one of my current mentors, I can say her name, Manon Butler. I love that woman.
Yeah,
And she's
I
a
love
leader
her.
within district government as well. I will never forget, like I saw her come in a room and she had on like these stilettos and like was dressed to the nines. And I was like, who is this woman? And, you know, she was fabulous and fly, but then she started talking and I was like, she's from DC and she went to Georgetown for undergrad and law school. Like, okay, this is someone that, you know, I definitely want to know. And so for her, our relationship has been so important. There have been countless other, especially Black women that have also served as mentors to me. I think I had to be in a space ready and for the universe to give that to me. And also, you know, deal with some of the negative stereotypes that I had to unlearn about just Black women. The flip side of that coin, though, is there are a lot of women, unfortunately, that are threatened or don't want to give you game because whatever reason. And so, you know, I just pray for discernment on who I choose to invest energy with and spend time around. But it's been transformational. Like there's no better group of Black women that like love on me, that get me together, but also genuinely love me and are always cheering for me. And that's been so important. And it's not been a struggle to find, but certainly has taken some work, I think, on myself in order to get there. Nancy Ware is another one that like always pours into you and just the wisdom. So I know I wouldn't be where I am currently and even where I'm aspiring to go without other Black women paving the way and mentoring me to be ready for my next level. So yeah, to me, there's way more of that than there is like the kind of stereotypical like cattiness that happens among women. But I'd be lying to say like some of that doesn't exist.
So I was in a college prep program when I was in the 9th grade, from 9th grade to 12th grade. And you're assigned a mentor, and that woman has been my mentor pretty much ever since. And we have kept in touch through the years. She's come to like all my personal stuff, graduations, baby showers, and we get together maybe once a month. Pre-COVID, it was once a month. And now we've been trying to get back together to do some virtual stuff. But other than that, I had found it a little bit difficult. I think for me, it's really because there really are no opportunities in DC government to seek mentorship in a way that you'd be interacting with someone and or meet people outside of your agency and realize, oh, you know, this person's goals and their accomplishments align with things that I'm interested in and things that I'm trying to do. So for example, you know, I work in HR, but my agency has independent personnel authority. So we don't really have to go through DCHR to do pretty much anything. So I'm isolated in that way that I don't really have a full HR network available to me because I don't really need to reach out to DCHR that often on most things. And so the opportunities just aren't really there to interact and meet women at other agencies, even if they're not in the HR community. I think DC did, they did like that management symposium. I don't know if you all went. They did this like huge management symposium kind of thing last year. Can you all still hear me? My phone is ringing.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So they did this management symposium thing a couple of years ago, not a couple of months ago, may have been last year, this time last year, can't remember when. And it really was the first time they did it. They brought all of management through all of DC government together. And, you know, a lot of people sat up on a stage and talked. And then when it was over, it really wasn't really an opportunity to like meet people or talk to people. You kind of just got your lunch and you left. So in terms of like meeting people within your field or outside of your field or similar field, it's really hard to do that if it doesn't exist at your agency. So I'm absolutely open to it. When I first came to DC government as an attorney, I worked with all Black women, and it was great. And they still mentor me in a way. We've just all sort of taken different career paths, but we still keep in touch. They are seasoned attorneys, but all in different roles now. One is like an administrative law judge, another is a deputy general counsel. And I still lean on them for advice around, you know, working with people, best people to go to in certain situations, best practices, how to deal in certain situations. And they have been really helpful in that way. But it's not a sort of like structured mentor-mentee kind of a relationship, which I would love to have. I think there's still a lot that I need to learn about management and leadership and navigating at a certain level within government, but also just at a certain level of when you're at a certain level within leadership. So I'm not, you know, I'm not leading an agency, but I advise leaders and I advise my deputy directors. And so I'm at that level where, you know, they're here and I'm like right here. And I really want somebody to help me grow in this area and really help me to decide, am I trying to get here? Or what skills do I need to get here if that's where I want to go, or if I think this is my lane and I'm okay with that. I'd love to be able to have somebody that can coach me through that. And right now it's just not, you know, there really hasn't been an opportunity presented where I've met somebody in an organic way and said, you know, I really like the way this person moves and talks, and, you know, they're smart and knowledgeable and they have a strong work ethic and all that sort of stuff. I haven't, you know, that opportunity just hasn't presented itself.
Yeah, I thought about this while you all were talking. This may have been about 2 years ago. Vice President Pence, he made a statement about interactions across gender, right? Where he said he doesn't meet with women alone. He doesn't have dinner with women. And he talked about his wife being present in many instances. And I guess he was trying to, in his own way, say that this is an accountability thing for him, right? But then there were so many women who came out and said, well, that limits opportunities for women to connect with men at that level in leadership, to be taught exactly what you're talking about, Jessica, right? So if a number of men or most men took that approach, then that would even more stifle opportunities for women. So as women, how have you all been able to navigate opportunities for personal development on a professional side, right? Personal professional development through potentially either formal mentorship from men or just interactions where you can grow? Like, have you seen those barriers in place where you've got to jump over hurdles because you're a woman and you're interacting with these men?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't seen barriers. I remember my first mentor was, I'm going to blank on his title, but Tripp was like a director of maybe youth programs at the Columbus Urban League, where I'm from. And I remember being like 15 years old. And my first summer job was working at the Ohio Department of Education, and working with him. He was like, why don't you have a business card? Again, mind you, I'm 15. Like, who knows what the card even said on it, right? But I vividly remember him like taking me under his wing, and he was my first mentor. And so I've been fortunate in that way to have lots of men that have mentored me in a professional setting throughout my career. Right now, I work under a man, and I will say, like, he has been the most helpful out of any supervisor that I've had, like, to date. And it's a white man, and like, constantly comes and we have discussions where he's like, what's next for you, and how are you building those skill sets now? And you need to be thinking about that now. And I know a lot of people don't have that, so it's not something that, you know, I take for granted, but that's been critically important in terms of my leadership and growth as well, to have male leadership and mentors throughout the way, and on my journey, I should say. And I haven't really encountered kind of what you alluded to at all, Silas. I will say that unfortunately, I have been around men that try to present themselves as mentors, or someone that, like, is interested in a strictly professional relationship, and then, like, you meet with them, etc., and you know, they're on some whole different type of time, which, you know, is unfortunate. So that has happened more times than I would like, but I've never had or felt that a relationship, a professional relationship, was stifled because of gender.
Yeah, I have the same with my supervisor. He's our chief of staff, and he's mentored me tremendously. We also started in the general counsel's office together. So he was on my hiring panel when I got the job at my agency, you know, like 7 years ago. And we both taken different roles. And every time he supported me, he's guided me in a really meaningful way. And now that he's my supervisor, he does the exact same thing. You know, you really should, you know, what are you doing to grow your relationships in DC government? You know, let me put you on to this. Let me, you know, what's the next level for you? Have you started thinking about that? And that's been really, really, really helpful. And I think sometimes you get to a certain level as women in general, but probably Black women in particular, you start having sort of like this imposter syndrome. Like, am I where I'm supposed to be? Have I really earned my spot? Have I really earned my seat here? And he's really helped me to see that, yes, you have, you belong here, you've worked hard for it, you're doing a really good job, and here's how you can grow and be better. And I think also being the only woman in the room, that didn't happen intentionally. And I know that because I've sat on many of the hiring panels for some of the upper level management stuff, and it just ended up that way. But I don't feel that it stifled me anyway. I feel like all of the men have actually been super supportive and very respectful. I think the challenge that probably Mike Pence was alluding to, and that I have experienced, is when you do have a genuinely healthy working relationship with a man, the perception could be that there's more to it than that, or there's some intimate relationship. And so if you two are both married, then you have to be even more hyper vigilant about, you know, where you go and being together too frequently. You may be meeting, but now you need to keep the door open so that it's like, you know, it's no perception of you're doing something. And that's really unfortunate, because people have been so led to believe that there can't be any platonic relationships between men and women. And I know that most of the time that's because of their own experiences. And I've experienced that too. But it doesn't mean that every time you see a man and a woman together, that there's more to it than just a man and a woman together having a conversation that has nothing to do with I like you, you like me. It's really about something so much more elevated. And so that's been my experience mostly, is that I've had informal mentor relationships with men, but always try to make sure and be cognizant of the perception that there's something more going on, because workplaces are gossipy and workplaces are certainly toxic in those ways where if you're around somebody too often, somebody's going to have an opinion about that. But I haven't felt stifled in any way, being a woman, and I really do um, attest that to just the work environment, and that when I hear other women talk about that, I'm grateful that that hasn't been my experience so far.
You guys, throughout this conversation, we've said it multiple times that you all have had similar experiences, but more importantly, you all have had similar approaches to your personal life and also professional lives. So as we kind of wrap this conversation up, I know oftentimes we are shy about our own accomplishments. We're shy about encouraging ourselves to take on more and to ascend into a higher position. So the way I want to end this thing is by each of you saying to the other person what you wouldn't say to yourself or what you wouldn't say to encourage yourself. And I wouldn't normally do this, but I see so much of a synergy between the both of you. So I'll start with you, Shae. Say something, I guess, in direction to Jessica that you think is really for yourself, but it's something that you can say to someone else to make yourself more comfortable saying it.
That's a loaded one. I've enjoyed this conversation. Like you said, see so many similarities. And so I guess I'll start by saying, stop playing small for other people. It's time to walk in your authentic trueness. And it's time to lead, because there's no cavalry coming to save you. The person is you. And it's time to dig in and be about the work that you've always said you're about, and stop playing small to make other people feel comfortable.
That was good. That was good. Um, and I think in response to that, I won't say in response to what Silas asked us to do, I would say, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job, not only because it's a pandemic, but because you're doing the work. Nothing has been given to you. You've earned everything that you have. You've worked hard for it and you deserve it. And you will continue to grow as long as you are continuing to invest in yourself. Make those decisions that grow you personally and professionally. Keep investing in yourself and committing the time and committing the work to growth. And I mean, you'll continue to do great things.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. I do appreciate the both of you for participating in this, and I keep calling it an experiment because I'm working with each of these to get to perfection. Even though, Jess, we know that perfection is something that can get in our way sometimes. So, these are a series of experiments with these conversations, and I'm glad that you all were willing to participate. And I'm most happy about the fact that you all got a chance to meet. And it's my hope, like all the other connections that I've been able to be a part of, that somewhere down the line, months from now, years from now, that the both of you can in some way be useful to one another. So that's the big takeaway from this. And again, I thank you guys for being a part of this.
Thank you, Silas, and thank you for the introduction. Shae, I'm going to follow you on Instagram.
Yes.
Get your contact information. Yeah.
I look forward to it. Again, thank you, Silas, for the opportunity and connecting. And I definitely look forward to being in touch. This was great.
All right, good stuff. Well, for those that are watching, again, this is How Should I Introduce You with Jessica Gray and Shae Harris. Thankful for the both of them for joining in this conversation. And thank you guys for watching it. and we'll see you pretty soon. All right. Peace out.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye.